everybody, and welcome to the AXR Marketing Director Incubator. 2021, the program that helps you be better prepared for career conversations and to make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dixon. I lead the sales and marketing practice for AXR Recruitment and Search. And over the year, I'll be introducing you to an incredible group of marketing leaders to share learnings from their career journey. They'll also be giving advice on what you need to know to make a great career decision. And we'll also get some insights on what life is like as a marketing director, which is a new piece this year. And welcome to our first guest of 2021, Sarah Nichols of Bacardi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone.
Good to have you. Good to have you here. We'll explore Sarah's career as we go, but she's got, I guess, circa 20 years experience, mainly in the alcoholic beverage space, but worked across multiple categories and markets. And your core specialization is marketing, but you've also worked in the sales space and more recently general management as interim MD of Bacardi, which would have been an interesting role. Now, the format for those of you who are joining us for the first time is that you're muted, unfortunately, but we do want to hear from you. So as a chat facility, feel free as we go, if there's things we talk about that you're interested in or questions you've got for me or for Sarah, throw them on the chat and I'll come to them as we go, and we'll have a section at the end as well for we'll try and leave time for any open questions. Now we're going to try and keep this, or we'll keep this to 45 minutes. Last year we were an hour. We've had some feedback that we'd rather be shorter and sharper, get you guys away for your 9 o'clock meetings. So we'll be done in 45 minutes. So without further ado, let's get into this, Sarah. Now, before we talk about your career, I want to just I guess ask a couple of things to let everyone know a bit more about you, the person. So one of the things that I'm always really interested in is, from childhood, we always kind of project forward and think, I wonder what I'll do when I'm grown up. So going back to those days, was there a particular job you dreamt of as a kid?
Yes, there was. Definitely between the ages of probably 12 and 15, I wanted to be a window dresser. So it was all about dressing windows in top-end retail shops.
Wow. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I think I've always loved style. I've always loved retail and creativity. So yeah, there was definitely, that sort of bent towards that. But yeah, needless to say, I didn't do any window dressing. I think it's actually a very difficult profession to get into.
Yes.
Very competitive. So.
Yes. I can imagine it's probably one of those niche jobs that sounds quite cool. Oh, cool. Interesting. Right. And if I was to kind of not stalk you, but follow you around the supermarket, what treat would I find in your shopping basket?
Twisties.
Twisties.
Cannot go past a bag of twisties. I'm very much a salty rather than sweet girl, so twisties you would find.
Yeah, we've all got our guilty pleasures. Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's get into your career then, Sarah. So window dressing wasn't on the card, so you got into marketing. How did that come about?
Funnily enough, I actually spent my career in two halves. So the first part of my career I spent starting off as a waitress, and then ended up running bars and restaurants in Melbourne, and then went over to London and did the same job there, ending up as operations manager for a group of bars and restaurants in London. And I remember at the time when someone from the now defunct Seagram came in, was talking to me about one of the brands that we had behind the bar, which was Morgan Spiced Rum. And I was berating Morgan Spiced Rum and saying how dreadful the brand was. And I can't believe that they've brought this sugary sweet rum out and you can't mix it and this, that, and the other. And then the next morning I got a phone call from Seagram saying, we've actually got a job in our brand development team. We'd be really interested in speaking to you. You spoke to our MD yesterday, who happened to drop by
the MD?
in the restaurant, the MD of this particular part of the business.
Okay.
And he really wants to speak to you. So that was actually, it was a brand development opportunity. So it was leading a team of sales and marketing individuals. Yeah. But quite a entrance into marketing. And at that point, it was much more of a commercial bent towards that that job than a marketing one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I fell into it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What a way to get into it. And through your marketing career, have you ever kind of wavered and thought, oh, I wonder if there's a different direction I should be going down?
No, I've always having held both commercial and marketing roles, I think marketing for me, I love because of the strategic intent of the role, the long-term strategic process that you go through. In terms of other pieces of the business, I think doing an MBA really opened my eyes up to finance, supply chain, production, HR. So after exploring those sort of elements of different departments within a business, I've always fallen back to marketing. I really love the sort of consumer behaviour piece that marketing is anchored in. But in saying that, I'm a very commercial marketer. So sort of sitting around doing brand equity triangles is probably not my cup of tea. But no, I don't think I have wavered from, it's very much a commercial and marketing part of the business that I've wanted to progress in.
We mentioned before that you spent time in sales. Was that when was that in your career? What did you do there?
That was really my first role. So heading up the brand development team for Seagram, which back then, this is when Absolute Vodka, this really aged me, when Absolute Vodka was new into the market in the UK.
I remember that.
So I headed up a team of sales reps, if you like, that used to go into top-end bars in London and restaurants. And so that was very much field sales management. And from there, progressed into sort of national account roles within the sales department. And funnily enough, back then I moved over to Bacardi initially and held several different types of roles within the sales organisation.
Yeah, I think that sales is a fantastic role for marketers to do at some point. It's often, I think it's a great entry-level role in terms of just understanding customers and getting really close to the market. But being able to kind of do that as you go is I think, is fantastic as well. In terms of your broadening experience, is there one role in particular that through your career you would pick and say that's given me the best kind of broadening experience that has helped me as a marketer, as a leader?
I think there's probably two. One is customer marketing. So to your point, understanding, it's almost like a Venn diagram of customer, brand and sales. And I think that's a pivotal role in any organisation, because you really have, three key stakeholders that you have to balance what you're doing. So customer marketing, to me, I think is a great role to broaden your experience and get real understanding of how to manage stakeholders effectively. And the other one for me is a geographical broadening. So moving into different markets around the world really helps for you to understand cultural nuances, how the same company operates very differently in different markets, how consumers are different and how customers are different. And then not just looking at their differences, but actually the similarities. So I think those two roles, from a functional point of view and from a broadening of a geographical point of view, are probably the two that I would lean on.
Yeah, I love the geographical piece as well, because I think it's interesting to see how that will I guess develop post-COVID as we start to travel again. But certainly we've seen, I think, over the last few years, a trend towards globalization of marketing strategy, which has perhaps taken away some of the decision-making that would happen in local markets. Do you think that's a trend that's here to stay, or does it, because it feels to come and go, we globalize, we localize, but in the moment, it certainly feels that we're in a global market.
Yeah, look, I think for big brands, it feels right that you have a strategy which is a global strategy. I think where we have moved, and I've seen this in the 20 years of being in the business, we've moved from having a very rigid stance on we're doing everything and it needs to be exactly the same in every market to the strategy is a global one. Now what you need to do is execute that at a local level. And I think we have become much better as a marketing function of understanding local execution and working together with global counterparts to really, but it does take time to explain to them what it means locally and how you can adapt the plans. But as long as the strategy holds in the global sense, then I think it makes sense to execute from a local level.
Yeah. And if you, as a marketer, particularly as a more senior marketer, have worked in different markets around the world, then I guess your perspective and ability to connect with global marketers and talk about their world as opposed to just having this myopic view in your own market probably develops that relationship and enables you to leverage that more.
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, it's standing in other people's shoes and having empathy for that global marketing team, which is, you know, I think it's a really, really challenging job, global marketing. I think there's a lot of young marketers that love the sound of it. But when you talk to global marketers, it's very, very challenging because you've really, you know, you've got a massive span of control over many markets, but you don't have that localization where you can just make things happen. You have to be a very good collaborator, great communicator, understand each market in depth, which is difficult when there's so many countries.
Yeah, completely. For those of you interested in global marketing, last year in the Incubator program, we had on Megan Farquhar, who's the global marketing director of JDE, who's based in Amsterdam. And actually coming up next, we've got Nick Boyden, who is the new global brand director for Centrum for GSK. So that's one of their global brands that he runs from Australia. So really interesting to talk to these people because it's quite a different role.
Yeah,
it really
and I did global marketing for McWilliams wines. Really challenging in different markets, and I think, you know, you look at Asia. I mean, China is extremely different than Singapore, which is extremely different than Taiwan, which is extreme. Yeah. So you can lump it all in together, but the differences and the nuances are quite you know, vast.
A question we often get asked, Sarah, is for future leaders coming through that is about their own development. But I guess they perhaps look at that's Siri learning.
Watch went off then.
What's going on?
Siri's asking me questions.
Siri's want to get involved in the interview. That's great. Yes. In terms of learning and development, where I'm coming to is as a marketing director. Do you still get formal L&D? Is that something that happens? How does it work at your level?
I think it depends on the company that you're working for. I'm very lucky at Bacardi. I've just been chosen to go in the Harvard Leadership Program, which is at the Harvard Business School in Boston, and that's all about putting sort of the top leaders globally through a leadership program which runs for 2 years. And for me, learning and development is fundamental to, or I feel that it's fundamental to any role. You never stop that learning and development, or you shouldn't stop that learning and development for you or any of your team. But I do think the onus is on the individual to drive that. So, you know, I'm lucky that I've got that opportunity, but there are other positions that I've held where I haven't had that, and I've had to go out and actively, proactively look at my career and sort of almost draw up a list and say, well, where do I need to really bolster my experience, and go off and actively seek out either mentors, people to help guide you on that. Agencies are great, or putting yourself through courses to really bolster that experience and capability.
Yeah. We want to move on now to advice, and the program is aimed to showcase your career, but actually use your experience to help others with their decision making and to think about their career planning. And we've got a lot of stuff to kind of over the course this year we want to get into. So there's a few areas we'll go into now. From your perspective, something I talk a lot about with individuals is their profile within an organization. They often come to me because they're frustrated with their lack of progress. Perhaps they've been passed over for a promotion, and they come to me, and I challenge them. I think you're talking to me at the wrong time. There's more for you to do in your business, and often the reason that you're perhaps not getting the return is that your profile is too low. What advice would you give others to build their profile in a meaningful way within their own organization?
I think one of the things that helps individuals do that, or from my experience, definitely, both from my own experience, but also looking at others, is to choose an element of the business that you're really, really passionate about and that you have something to offer, and then go after that and put yourself forward and say, look, you're doing this project, I want to be part of it. How can I help the organisation? How can I build? And it's a great way of building a network, because quite often, especially in cross-functional projects, you get to meet a whole lot of people, and that, you warrant a seat at the table because you're giving something to the organisation, but it also allows you to really build your network. And then the second thing after that, I think, is maintaining relationships. And now we live in such a connected world that that's pretty easy to do. So LinkedIn, a good example of that is when I moved back to Bacardi last year, having worked there, 15 years ago. And I was still very connected to a lot of the people, the chief marketing officer who used to be my marketing director, the guy that heads up e-commerce now used to be my sales director. So it's the onus is on you to continue and build those relationships. And I think LinkedIn is a wonderful way to do it. Writing articles, commenting, reading things that other people put, and putting yourself out there, and don't be afraid to put your hand up and as I say, offer yourself up to projects where you will get exposure to other parts of the business, and that really helps to build your profile.
And that's being proactive. That's not waiting for it to happen to you, which sometimes you'll get approached and asked to go on cross-functional teams, but those who build their profile well are the ones who step forward and actually put the hand up.
Yeah.
But I think one of the phrases you used there was, you talked in terms of what can you do for the business, as opposed to what can the business do for you. And that's very different. And I think sometimes in more formative career stages, people are a little bit self-orientated, whereas in actual fact they're an employee and asset of the business that the business wants a return on. And if you're able to demonstrate the fact that you are wanting to broaden your experience and get involved in more things, that's going to increase the return on investment in you. Yeah. But it's thinking of it from the business's point of view, not just from yours.
Absolutely.
But
totally agree.
Yeah. Now, if somebody does feel they've maybe done that well, they've gone through the cross-functional piece, but their career is starting to slow a little bit, and their potential in their own perspective isn't being realized, what should they do?
That's a good question. I think, again, from your network, having sort of reaching out to people that have probably got a bit more experience within that, so to the middle to end of their careers, because they do have, we have the experience of, everybody's had that experience at one time or another. Even CEOs of huge companies have felt that. So I do think the mentor piece is really important. Reaching out to different people and sort of saying, look, I'm stuck, I've done this, I've done that, how can you help me better understand what I need to do? So reaching out for help. But again, it goes back to your network, building your profile. You can't ask for help when you haven't actually built your network and profile. So I think that's important as a sort of first step. So there's asking for help. There's also, I think, having really, and sometimes they're uncomfortable conversations, but having very direct conversations with your leader, and putting it out there and saying, look, I'm stuck. Like, I feel like I've been in a rut for many years. How can we work together to sort of navigate my way through this? Now, that's not always, I think that's great if you've got a great leader. Yeah. It's a little bit challenging if the leader is not somebody that you can reach out to, and therefore that's when I would go to a mentor or other people around me. I think actually recruiters are great people to knock on the door and say, this is where I'm at, help me sort of understand what other options I have. And then to also, I think, put yourself out there, go and do some job interviews and actually sort of look at what is out in the market, look at different things outside of your industry, jobs that, you've got experience for. You may not have the industry experience, but you've definitely got the capability and skill set. Again, it's about being proactive and putting yourself out there. Nobody knows, but you do what you need to do, and making sure that you take those steps, I think, is crucial to getting out of a rut.
Yeah, I often talk about having a career conversation with somebody. If I'm looking at someone's career and I'm tracking it, I think it's really interesting. When I approach someone, I think there's often sometimes a recruiter's talking to me. He says, does this mean if I start talking to them, they're going to get me a job? And it's like, well, not necessarily. What I'm interested in is your career pathway and where you're at, and actually a career conversation with a recruiter who's a specialist, for instance, in their space. It should be quite instructive. It should help you understand where are you, and if you have slowed, then how could you accelerate or perhaps take a different turn? And that conversation actually can equip you to have a great conversation turn with your business. As opposed to necessarily thinking that conversation with the recruiters, the first step out the exit door. It doesn't have to be. No. For me, the best relationships I have with people build over time, and they talk to me when they're just looking for a sounding board. The stage they're at, or there's a role they want to go for internally. They didn't get it last time. Should they go again, but what else perhaps could they consider?
And I do think there is a point where, and again, it goes back to the type of leader that you are working for and with. But I mean, many times I've had individuals that have sort of sat down and said, look, I've been for a job interview, or I'm thinking about doing this. And my job is not, as a leader, I don't think, is to maintain them within the company. It's to grow them as an individual, and having those really honest conversations can sometimes open the door to a lot of other things, where all of a sudden that person, because you put it in their head that, look, I need to develop and I want to develop my career, the good leader will sit there and sort of go, okay, well, if they are a person that is a high-performing individual, how do I keep them motivated? What is really, what is that thing that they're thinking that isn't working for them? And how do we really build that and make them flourish? So I think honest conversations, I think there's too much of not having that transparency because of the feeling of, oh my gosh, if I tell the leader that I'm thinking about moving on, are they going to get rid of me? So it's being bold and courageous, I think, in that space.
In my experience, often when I'm approached proactively, someone comes to me and said, oh, I need to move. And the first question is, well, what conversations have you had internally? Because it feels to me as if you're not ready. There's another role or two you could do in that business. How have those conversations gone? Well, I went for the show, I didn't get it, so therefore I'm going. It's like, well, really? Did you ask for feedback? I didn't get any. You're like, well,
ask again.
ask again, and you've got to demonstrate, because sometimes the leader actually might not be that comfortable with what could be perceived as giving poor feedback or giving feedback that is not great news. And delivering tough news can be tough on the leader as well. But I think if you demonstrate you're open to it and you're persistent for that feedback, and you create it's incumbent on you as well to create a safe environment for the leader to say, hey, I need to know, what am I missing?
And I think too, actually not getting a job can be really, really helpful on many fronts, especially if you get great feedback, because it shows up, okay, well, I've got these gaps that's been identified. How do I then close them? I think it builds resilience. And then if you can take that feedback and actively do something with it to demonstrate that you have listened to that leader that's given you the feedback and you've built on that, then you're in a really good position for your next move, I think.
Yeah. Do you always need to feel ready for that next move?
No, I think there's too much sort of indecisiveness around being ready. I know that you may have heard the stat, it's definitely with talking about females. There's that old stat around males only need to know 30% of the job and to go for a job, and females need to know 70% of the job. And I think as long as you feel comfortable and confident in bringing your whole self to that job and open to learning on the job, then there should be a stretch, I think, with any new job. You shouldn't just walk into it and creates happy days right from the beginning. So I think you have to back yourself, and at the same time be really clear in the areas that you think that you'll need help and guidance, and be clear with your leader about, okay, these are the areas that I feel really confident in. Here's some that I need, not necessarily hand-holding, but I need some guidance, I need some coaching. I'm going to proactively work on a development plan for myself, and I'd love your support on it.
I think it shows great self-awareness. I think sometimes there's a perception that if you're going for a role, you've got to, wear this suit of armor that shows you are just invincible and you are the perfect person, and that's how you're going to win the role. And it's not about that at all. It's about showing up, the whole of yourself, as you said, and being able to point to what you bring in terms of strengths, but absolutely being able to say that these are the things that I know are the stretches for me. But I've thought about it, and I've thought about what I need to do to close those gaps, and I think I can do that in the role whilst being effective. And that's a really much better conversation than the person who tries to dance around the gaps. The other thing I wanted to talk about as well, Sarah, was around the in this process of awareness and understanding of your own development. A lot of people struggle with the what's often the annual review. This once a year meeting where you talk about yourself. I'm interested on your views on an annual review, and in particular think about how somebody might prepare for that, and whether it's a once a year thing or not.
So the annual review for me as a leader is not a great plan. I am not a big supporter of the annual review. I am, however, a massive supporter of ongoing reviews and an ongoing personal development plan that you reflect and you review maybe monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly. It's really, I think it's absolutely vital. When you get to the end of the year and you're reviewing KPIs, et cetera, it becomes there should be nothing new that comes up at that annual review. So if you're constantly reviewing, and I think it's not just about your KPIs, but it's reviewing, for me, it's like, okay, well, how have you developed as an individual within the organisation throughout the year? What have you done to proactively go and address some of the areas that we have discussed around this is where you need to develop a little, build your muscle? What are those? Talk me through those. But generally, I think great leaders do that on an ongoing basis. And it doesn't have to be a formal, come in with decks and decks of information. It should be a conversation led by a really good, well put together development plan. And if you don't have a business that you're working in that exists in, again, for me, it's about being proactive and writing your own. You don't need to have a leader that does it. And you shouldn't have a leader that writes your personal development plan. It should be yours and you should own it.
Yeah. I think if you had that plan, then the review is, because a lot of companies do have them. I'm not you.
Most do.
Yeah, I'm not you. I think they're. I think if that's the one time of the year that you're talking about your career, then you're missing the opportunity as an individual. It's incumbent on you to be prepared to have that, development career conversation continually, and it is a continuous conversation that you have, because it's not just about what's next for you, it's about how you're performing in your role and getting that feedback loop from your boss and other stakeholders, which is going to help you again with that plan and continually to develop and iterate that plan going forward. Interesting. Let's move on to insights from the role of the marketing director. I think for a lot of people on the call, there'll be some marketing directors on the call who'll be really interested in your views and how you deal with these things. And there'll be others who aspire to be a marketing director and think, I actually don't know what goes on. And I'd love a bit of insight into what happens as a marketing director. Talk to me first about what does the marketing director, what role do they play on as part of the exec or as part of the board?
For me, the marketing function is really around, as I said before, is around driving strategy, which comes out of understanding customers and the behaviours customers or consumers have, both. And so really our role is to guide the strategy and to ensure that we are delivering to the customer and consumer all of the time. So having a voice of the consumer at the table is a really important aspect from a marketing director's point of view. The other thing that I think, there's always, and there should be a good tension, healthy tension between sales and marketing. It's having that long-term vision as to what the brand, the company is trying to achieve sustainably for the long term, as well as having an eye on what needs to be delivered from a short term. So having that balanced outlook for the business is really important. And then I think the other piece is when you get to the exec level is, most of it is strategy, numbers and people, to be quite honest. As leaders, I'm not writing brand plans anymore. I'm not writing briefs. I'm leading the team to do that. So bringing to the table some of the insights that are garnered through consumer research is important to better showcase that to the exec team so they understand where the strategies come from and how they're executed. Bringing to the table insights around what's happening out in the bigger environment, so consumer trends and how they have an impact on the business is vital, especially now as we're moving through very tumultuous times and things are changing quickly. That often affects consumer behaviour, radically over small or long periods of time. So having a voice of the consumer at the exec table is very important, but also it's the strategic intent, which is fundamental as a marketing director, I think, at the exec table too.
Does the marketing director have the ability or expectation that they do guide the board? Because you're bringing a future perspective, as opposed to a lot of the roles are measuring and analysing and thinking what's going on right here and now, whereas actually you're doing that but looking forward as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a fundamental part of it. It's sort of crystal ball stuff to a degree, but being one step ahead, having your eye on not only what's happening out in the macro environment, but how it's affecting your industry, how it's, everything from, it's your classic pestle type model, which is your political, economic, social, legal and technological changes that are happening and how we are going to adapt as a company. And I think the adaptation piece is probably the most crucial during these times. And, it has been over the last 20 years. I can remember early on my career, you'd write 5-year brand plan strategy papers. And now it's like, at best, you'll get a 3-year plan and that will change. So bringing that to the board and outlining. And the other part too, which I think is really interesting, is the marketing function looks at consumer behaviour and consumer/customer behaviour in detail all the time. And quite often the boards, and we've seen this in many companies, and unfortunately it's still the case for a lot of companies, is that their diversity and inclusion within the board is not existent. So part of the role as a marketing director is to explain to the board about how customers and consumers are thinking, that may not be the same type of people that are sitting around the board. And that is, I found that quite challenging at times, because you're asking people to change their sort of view and their optics of the world into, if you're marketing, games for 16-year-old boys and your board is full of 60-year-old blokes, how do you get into their headspace and say, actually, you may not like it, but this 16-year-old, that's what drives their behaviour and that's what drives sales, and this is why we need to do what we're doing.
A lot of companies have started to try to bring the voice of the consumer into their board by bringing, I guess, more of a consumer persona onto the board, whether it's on an ongoing basis or a rotational basis, to disrupt thinking, to exactly that. And so I think that voice of the consumer is a really
Powerful,
interesting
yeah.
responsibility that marketing has.
Yep.
Interesting. You mentioned before part of the role of marketing in the exec on the board is to maintain this healthy tension between sales and marketing. Now we run the sales director incubator too, so I'm asking this question of the sales guys, and I'd be interested to see, you know, what does healthy tension actually look like? What does it feel like, and what is it?
For me, and it goes back to something around sort of career too, and it's having that ability. I think it's much easier to have that healthy tension when both sales and marketing directors have spent some time in each other's corner. So in terms of that, you know, I feel really comfortable sitting in front of customers because I've done that from a sales position. So I understand, again, it comes back to empathy and understanding, you know, just how the customer is feeling. And then I think there's always that tension between long and short-term goals. So sales tend to be very much short-term goal driven. Marketing tend to be longer-term driven. And so you're always going to get that tension. And I think it's a good thing because it's not one way or the other. You have to look at it. And, you know, for a lot of marketing people, they need to understand that whilst you can sit behind a desk and write some great strategy and do these wonderful ads and campaigns, etc., if that's not resonating with your customer, and in this case, I'm talking about the customer from an FMCG point of view, being the Coles, the Woolies, you know, that customer, then you're not going to get to your consumer. So being customer facing, customer sort of focused and consumer centric to me is a really nice way of looking at consumer centric from a marketing point of view and customer focused from a sales point of view. And having those conversations, and don't shy away from them, because at the end of the day, it's better to bash it out around a table and walk out aligned rather than, oh, marketing said that we've got to do this and, you know, and we want to do this, because never the twain shall meet, and you don't actually end up having great, I've never seen great results when you have that sort of tension. So healthy tension is having the debate and putting out there, what are the objectives, what have we got to solve for, and coming together and realising, you know, and aligning. And I think, you know, MDs play a role there too, of kind of bringing the two forces together, if you like, and making sure that you make the right business decisions.
Yeah, get it right. It's really powerful, I imagine. But I can also imagine sometimes it's if you've got two strong personalities, then it can be a bit of a fight to get to the right outcome.
Yeah, definitely.
So from a customer point of view, what role does the marketing director play with the customer? Again, using the FMCG term, not the consumer, but the customer.
I think it's really important for the marketing director to show up to the customers and talk about what the brand strategies are and what we're trying to achieve, as long as it's, again, customer focused. So customers are not interested, and especially now, are not interested in hearing from marketing directors that I just want to grow my brand. It's all about how do we aid the customer in growing their brand and their business, and we can use the brands to do that. But I think it's really powerful, and this again comes back to the long-term, short-term. You know, short-term sales goals are sort of, here's a range review, here's all the products that I've got. But if the customer doesn't understand what your strategy is behind that as a business, then it's very difficult for them to make, I think, considered decisions. So being upfront and having that conversation at a top-to-top level to explain what is our approach to your business, how can our brands help your business grow, how can we grow your categories, and this is what we're going to bring to the table, sets it up, I think, really nicely for then the commercial team to walk in at all levels and have those conversations. If you don't set it up in that way, I think it becomes very transactional, and you're seen as sort of, you know, very tactical rather than a strategic partner. And sometimes, you know, you don't want to be strategic with every single customer, and there are times that you do want to be tactical, but I think showcasing that overarching theme. The other thing for me is also bringing customers in the loop with what's happening from a global point of view. Customers are always interested in, you know, everyone has the data. Like I'm not going to walk into Woolies and say, did you know that your shop is doing that? It's their shop, but they know that. But did you know that shoppers in New York, in Tokyo, are spending their dollars like this now, and their behaviour has changed. That really gets them interested. And I think bringing those global insights to the table at that top-to-top level is another thing that we can do if you're within a global business.
So there's two things there. One is about how you work, again, with sales in order to help them understand the strategic perspective of the brand and make sure they're equipped to have the right conversation, and they're not just focused on the immediacy of the range review, but also on that direct customer relationship as well. So that, and is that like an annual top to top, or are you more frequently in front of customers?
I think it's really important that, you know, the joint business planning should incorporate that, so that it's set up, and it doesn't have to be in every single meeting, but I think customers are genuinely interested in kind of what are your strategies, how are you going to bring them to life, and then innovation is always the key one that gets everybody excited. But I think you need to lay out the groundwork, and half of it is saying this is what we're not going to do, rather than trying to deliver everything. It's you know, the benefit in saying to a customer, we're here as a business partner to deliver this, this, and this. We're not going to play here because that's not where our core strength is also very powerful.
AXR as a business, we have built our sales and marketing practice over the last year, but historically the business is very well known in Australia for finance recruitment. And if you're a CFO in Sydney, then you know these guys really well. So been doing it a long time. What I'm interested from a marketer's perspective, what's the working relationship like between a marketing director and a CFO?
Look, I've had different relationships with CFOs. Some have been very strained and others have been fantastic working relationships. We currently have an awesome relationship with our finance director because he really understands and seeks to understand what we're trying to do from a marketing perspective. I think you have two styles of financial CFOs, one who wants to save money and one who is a little bit more visionary and can see that actually it's both top line growth as well as, you know, savings throughout the business. So, but one of the key things with the CFO is, again, to bring them on that journey and to help articulate what you are trying to achieve. You know, the A&P line within most companies is a big spend, a big piece of expenditure. So dropping things into a CFO that kind of, you know, he or she's rubbing their head going, why are we doing this? And this just seems a waste of money. It's crucial to take them on the journey and to explain to them why we're doing it. What is the return on investment, which they love that ROI conversation. And then also, I think, having the ability to sit there and say, hold me to account with this. You know, if we are investing this, it's fine for you to ask me, okay, what's your return on investment? Have you done a measurement and evaluation on it? Show me that this is actually paying off. And having those regular conversations, I think is absolutely crucial, but bringing them on that journey is probably the most important one.
Do they help as well with guidance around decision making and kind of increasing the financial acumen of the marketing function?
Yeah, and I think, you know, for many years marketing was seen as, oh, they just write checks and, you know, they just spend money on pretty campaigns and making ads. I think the marketing teams now have become much more commercially driven, and it's incumbent, I think, for marketing directors to reach out to their finance colleagues and ask them to come in and showcase how, and, you know, different ways of looking at financial modelling, how that can help, and really bringing not just marketing but also commercial teams on that journey again of, okay, if you want to model something like this, then here is the model. Let's talk you through it. Let's coach you through it. So I do think it's beholden to finance teams to also train and coach both commercial and marketing teams along that journey.
Yeah, fantastic. Some great insights from the role of marketing director. I think for those who are in the role as you are, that you learn that as you go and you develop that knowledge, understanding. But I think being able to have those insights for those who are on the journey towards that role is fantastic, Sarah. So that's been awesome. We're at 45 minutes, so we said we finish at 45. So more I'd love to ask you, but really enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for sharing your insights and a little bit about your journey as well. Guys, I look forward to seeing you all again on May 20th when we meet Nick Boyd. As I mentioned earlier on, Nick is GSK's global VP for the Centrum brand, so some really good insights, I think, and perspective that will come our way from Nick. I mentioned earlier too, we also run the sales director Incubator. For those of you who are curious as to what those guys are thinking about, and you want the view from the sales director, you're very welcome to join. Same format, a different group of people, but the next session of that is on May 6th. We've got Kim Murray. Kim's the VP of sales at P&G Personal Care for ANZ, Asia, Middle East and Africa, which is a big role. She's dialing in from Singapore. It must be going to be very early in the morning for her, so we appreciate that. All the sales and marketing sessions from 2020 and 2021 are available on our podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So, jump on, subscribe, and you can jump into any of those future and past podcasts. So thanks, everybody. Thanks again to Sarah. Have a great Thursday, and we'll see you all again soon.